Hey, Mark.
Hey Jack, how are you? All right, I'm just trying to make sure that the
Can you
layout.
hear me? I can't hear you.
Okay. Um,
I don't know whether it's you or me.
Testing one, two. My audio is coming through, so it must be your end. Okay, how do I?
Mark, do you mind trying to say something?
Testing one, two. Testing one, two.
No. Try now.
Testing one, two.
Yeah.
Testing one, two.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Man, I hate Zoom.
Yeah.
But
Can you hear any music coming through at the moment, Jack?
I can't hear any music.
Okay. Now, just give us 1 second, Jack. I'm going to try and make sure that this is all set up the way that we're hoping
Yeah,
for it to
go
be
for it.
set up. And we
Go for
have a
it.
couple of people joining the call in a second. So
Go for it.
now, just so you know, Jack, we are on. So just letting you know that as the people join the call, that we are on. So
Awesome.
all right, Dream Team, we are not too far from getting started, so we'll probably get started about 2 past 12. And so if you need to quickly get something to eat, get something to drink, and get ready for the next 90 minutes of what I can only call the most fantastic founder briefing when it comes to tax, finance, and accounting that we could possibly bring you, that would be wonderful. We're not too far away from getting started.
No pressure then, Mark.
All right, Jack, we're going to get started in a second, my friend, but I just wanted to quickly ask while we have just finalizing the start of the call, Jack, what are you most excited about today? When we're thinking about the founders briefing and FY27, just give us a quick snapshot so I can test on my end that everything is working correctly. What are you most excited about talking about today, Jack?
Oh, look, I love talking about accounting and tax in general, right? So, I like to think that between you and I, we've got,
Mhm.
a lot of the key topics covered. So there are a lot of, noise in the, tech space around the recent tax changes, but
Yeah.
actually very little actionable advice and a lot of preconceptions. So I'm excited to hopefully clear some of these misunderstandings and misconceptions. Yeah, so and also listen to some of the points that you're going to raise, which looking at the slides, seem very interesting.
Look, to be fair, Jack, I'm pretty sure that my job today is to make you look good and tell as many dad jokes as I possibly can. So, Dream Team, we're going to get started in 30 seconds. I'm just bringing up the last screen that we need to have ready to go for today's session. And we will be getting some interactive feedback at the start here, Jack, because we do want everyone to contribute and participate in this afternoon as well. So I'm
Perfect.
just bringing up my last sheet now, and we should be good to go. All right, that's there for when I need it. Jack, my friend, let's get started.
Good.
First of all, everybody, welcome to the Founders Briefing FY27. My name is Mark Orchard. We're joined by my dear friend and much smarter brains of this organization, Jack, that's for sure, Jack Lee from William Buck. And today we're going through the Founders Briefing FY27. Ideally, the conversations your accountant and finance team should be having with you right now possibly aren't. Jack, I'm mindful, as you mentioned previously, there's a lot going on. I don't think I've seen as much change in the last as I have in the last 6 months when it comes to the markets, the ATO, the budget, all those things, Jack. And so I guess today, if you are asking me what I was hoping to achieve today, is to try and make sure that we can put some signal to this noise and give everybody some, I guess, actionable takeaways from today. We'll get into that in a second. Before we jump into, I guess, the actual content for the day, Dream Team, as you possibly know, we have been tracking over the last 6 months through a start to scale program that we've had multiple sessions to. This is kind of the final capstone part to it in regards to thinking through and guiding founders and startups through, I guess, the next 6 to 12 months. But we went through a finance 101 for founders workshop that went all day. Jack, you'd be surprised. We actually kept everybody in the loop all day when it came to finance, which I thought was pretty
You
impressive.
must have
We then
pumped them with lots of coffee, Mark.
It was a lot of jazz hands, Jack. But we also got through pricing for scale and fundraising and exits for founders who are looking to do that in the next 12 to 18 months. But today, we are joined by Jack. Jack, do you want to do a quick introduction? Because I'm mindful that like you're quite look. You're not just a tax partner, Jack. Like, in a previous life, you actually wanted to be a pilot, I heard. So, do you want to quickly give an introduction to yourself, Jack?
Yeah, sure. Look, some of the attendees there would have potentially worked with me for a good number of years, but those who haven't met me yet, I'm a partner of William Buck. We're a mid-sized accounting firm, and my team works exclusively with tech companies of all sizes. We love tech. We love talking about all things finance with tech companies. In terms of the fighter pilot thing, that was me as like a 7 or 8 year old boy. Really, that's an example of an unrealized dream. So don't follow my example, please. Yeah.
To be
Yes.
fair though, Jack, like there's an easy line between fighter pilot and then obviously tax partner, right? So
Yeah.
both working with high growth machinery. It's just that one is very much startup related and one's probably much more Top Gun related, Jack. But I think
Wow.
you would have looked good in a Maverick jacket, mate.
Yeah. It's almost indistinguishable, Mark.
Got you. Well, for those who don't know me, I'm Mark Orchard. I'm CEO of Planet Startup. Planet Startup is a fractional CFO firm for early stage high growth tech companies, primarily seed to Series B, although we've had the blessing and the challenge of having a couple of publicly listed clients come on board as clients recently, Jack. So, as you can imagine, that's been an adventure. But today, what we are going to cover. So, anyone who does have previously done sessions with me know that I like a good quiz at the top of a session like this, Jack. But we're going to jump into post that quiz, like the founders briefing, and more specifically, what's changed, what matters, what should people be thinking about and doing, and like some practical next steps? Because I'm mindful that if we're being honest, Jack, today's session isn't about really having an opinion per se. We're not going to be critiquing the budget per se. We're literally going, well, where's the opportunity and how can we help founders make the most of that? What we do
Gotcha.
need you, Stream Team, we need you to have your mobile phone ready because that'll be really helpful when we start this quiz in a second. We're going to need a sense of humor because realistically, when you're talking for finance and accounting and tax and markets for 90 minutes, trying to keep that nice and light can sometimes be a challenge. So it's nice when you can laugh at some of our terrible jokes. But the enthusiasm and energy is what we're really looking for today, team. We'd love for you to keep this upbeat with us. And so, Jack, outcomes of today, what we're trying to help everybody to walk away is to know what's changing, know what matters, know what you should specifically do. Like, talk me through, Jack. I know you've had a couple of clients that you've spoken to over the last few months that have asked you similar questions. Top of mind, like, what's some of the things, I guess, that like you're trying to help clients think through before end of financial year at the moment?
Yeah, so look, there's basically, as far as 30th of June is concerned, for tech companies, you really want to do some tax planning. Ideally, some of these things are done well before now, but this is an example of better late than never, right? So, startups R&D tax incentive claims and is optimizing the startup's tax position because the way the R&D tax incentive works is that, if you treat the way the R&D costs are treated, you're incentivized to optimize your tax position as well. Otherwise, it will eat into the R&D refund.
Yep, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess if we're thinking about what I want the outcomes for today being, is I'd love each of the founders. I know there's some investors on the call and a couple of ecosystem supporters. Three things. I'd love for you guys to be able to have some action items for yourself. These are things that I should possibly talk to my accountant or my team about. But second of all, is that putting aside the positivity and negativity of changes, the carve outs, the complexity we get, like there's a lot there. What I'd like is to just have everyone have a commercial opinion on how they can possibly walk forward, knowing what can they do and how can they maximize their position regardless of what actually ends up being the case. And then lastly, I'd like founders to win. Like in FY27, I'd like to have more founders getting more success and more growth, Jack. So if we can contribute to that, my friend, like that would be a blessing, of course.
Agreed.
Now, let's jump into this quiz, Jack. And I'm mindful you haven't even seen this quiz, Jack. So this is going to be fun
Right.
for you as well. But tell me if we can now see that go across to the QR code. Dream Team, you should now be able to see a QR code to join our AHA Slides survey. I might even try and join it myself just to make sure that it's working. The numbers are going up, so that's always a good sign.
Good. I'm joined.
Excellent, Jack. Now, good news is this isn't going to be a quiz. We are literally not going to be quizzing you on the the tax changes. That would be terrible. What we are doing though is we would just love to get your feedback a little bit at the top of the call. In just how you guys are thinking about FY27 before we get started into some of our content. And so I'll give you 30 more seconds to quickly bring up the QR code. It also will stay at the top here as well, just in case that is something that you want to join as we go through some of the questions. All right. Now, first question, nice and easy. This all you need to do is add some words. Dream Team, when I feel, how do you feel when you think about FY27 right now? I'd love to just get a bit of a sentiment, a bit of a reality check. How is everybody thinking and feeling at the moment when it comes to FY27 so far? Now, Jack, what I'd imagine is that this is going to be very different to what we thought. Um, FY27 was going to be from probably March onwards. Like there's been a lot happen over the last 90 days. But what are you anticipating, I guess? General sentiment with startup founders at the moment. What's been your conversations with founders? How are you finding them feeling at the moment?
Yeah, look, the first word that came up is uncertain. Presumably that's the synthesis of some of the, words that the audience is typing in. I think that is a good way to summarize things, right? So, it's not all good and absolutely is not all bad. It's really hard to summarize. You've got these geopolitical shocks which have worldwide economic ramifications. When there are uncertainty, the checkbooks stay shut. Okay. Obviously, it also doesn't help economic activity, but at the same time, there's a lot of good things going on in the Australian tech space. We got really talented, hardworking founders. We've really, world-changing ideas. They can harness the power of AI. And at the same time, there's, all these tax changes that affect not just at one level, that affect the founders level, that affects the startups level, that affects the employees, participants of the
Mhm.
employee share schemes. So there is just a lot going on. And like you mentioned at the beginning at the very start, there's just a lot of stuff going on in the accounting, tax, and financial space.
Yeah, and I think that like all those together, Jack, is probably adding to, I can see uncertainties come up quite a few times. I can tell in regards to how big the words are, as like how often they're coming up. Awesome, team. All right, we're going to jump to the next question, which is what are your biggest opportunities in FY27? I'd love to just quickly get a quick pulse check from the room. Like, what are the things that you're seeing as being the biggest opportunities as you go into the new financial year? For me, I think, Jack, the biggest thing I'm noticing is that those who are already getting traction just want to go faster, and those who aren't getting the traction that they've been hoping for are now trying to refigure out, do they restart and reuse their their current product, or whether do they do a significant pivot. I'm just seeing that there's a lot of change, regardless
Hmm.
of where people are starting from. Would you agree with that?
Look, I totally agree with that, especially when it comes to like capability of AI, right? So, the market, the world economy and the share markets and just the countries in general, it's hard to keep up with the capabilities of AI. If you consider our financial markets as fairly efficient, i.e., is quite well informed. And then you look at the gyrations in the valuations of some of the blue chip companies, it just goes to show that AI's capability to surprise even the most well-informed and professional commentators and investors and experts.
Yeah. I think, Jack, like also when it comes to particularly the AI native companies, I've never seen budgets change this fast, going from like, AI spend being like a technical or a tech budget going now into labor budgets, and like, people actually trying new things to get quick traction. I've never seen things move this fast. That doesn't mean it's all great, Jack. Just means that things are happening, right? Thanks, team, for sharing those points. We're now going to go to the next, which is what are you most worried about right now? And Jack, the reason I want to bring this up is because just for context, as we go through the content, I'd like to make sure that we kind of get to what are the things that people are like, concerned about. I've had quite a few founders in particular recently tell me that they're thinking about going to Singapore and the US because of all the changes in the tax trust and CGT. And then we've had a discussion and realized that if they make some of those changes too quickly, that could actually be more problematic. Talk me through that, Jack. Like, what are you kind of thinking with some of the founders who are trying to be too proactive with some of the things that are happening at the moment? What are you kind of coaching them to do?
Yeah, look, this very much alludes to the some of the noise we mentioned about before. Like conceptually, lots of people are in disagreement with what the federal governments are doing. Threatening to go overseas. My personal take is that I don't think there's going to be a significant percentage of founders and would-be founders going overseas. But at the
Yeah.
same time, does it help? No, it does not help,
Yeah.
right? It does not help our international competitiveness.
Got you. Okay, Dream Team, we are going to give you 20 more seconds to fill this one out. But the next question is just going to be whether or not you think FY27 is going to be better, the same, or worse for your business. So we do have a Singaporean friend, so we can talk about that in a second. But the next question for your business. Do you think FY27 will be better or worse than FY26? Love to just quickly get a snapshot. I think that for most companies, it's going to be quite dependent on their industry or their situation, but it'd be lovely to quickly just get a pulse check as to how people are thinking at the moment. Jack, to be fair,
Wow.
people are still feeling pretty optimistic
I
about
love
next
it. I,
year,
I I
which is
love
good.
it. Look at how good the results are.
I mean, like from my point of view, Jack, I would have actually anticipated that it would have been a little bit more bearish. So to be fair, it's good to see that we still have mostly people pretty optimistic about the next 12 months.
And
All right.
potentially that just reflects people's excitement at the once again the opportunities presented by AI, both in terms of building a excellent product, but also just getting things done with as little cost as possible.
Yeah, got you. All right. Last question, Dream Team. What questions would you like answered today? This is your chance to quickly throw some questions from the audience up for us to keep note of for later in the discussion. But if there is anything that is top of mind for you guys today, would love to quickly put that up here for us as we track through the rest of the session. Now, we have actually like I'd argue, Jack got a ton of content for the next 70 odd minutes, and we can go as deep or as shallow depending on what some of the feedback is. But I think one of the things I did wanted to quickly discuss is it feels like at the moment there's a very um, like um, there's a very two-speed market when it comes to capital raising. Anything with AI traction and moats is getting like accelerated capital and a lot of it. And then everybody else seems to be going much slower and sometimes with a lot less traction when it comes to the raise. Jack, some of the clients that you've had over the last 12 months that have been raising capital quickly, is there anything in particular that you've noticed that's been in common with them?
Yeah, look, I agree that AI companies they tend to be quite popular. There's a common sort of attitude right now that every tech company is an AI company. I disagree with that. Yes, maybe every tech company uses AI, but is AI their reason for existence? Is the AI part of a key part of what they do? If you apply that criteria, then there's not it's not a matter of every tech company is an AI company. So if you use that definition, then yes, I do believe that AI focused tech companies have been found it easier to raise capital. So that is what I'm seeing with the companies that I've been talking to.
Got you. Now, I have some good questions here, Jack. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take note of them for as we go through our session today. And then I'm going to make sure that we bring them up as we go. Now, Dream Team, if any questions do come up, I would love for you to just put them in the chat in the Q&A section, and I'll try and make sure that we get to those as we go through the questions today. But Jack, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time that we go back to the presentation and let's get stuck into some of the things that have changed over
Hmm.
the last 6 to 12 months. All right. Quick reality check. So, if we're thinking about what's happened over the last 6 to 12 months, look, markets have changed. I would argue that in some ways the markets are slower when it comes to supporting SaaS companies in particular. But we've also just seen, like, the mega IPO that was SpaceX. We're going to have another couple of big IPOs before the end of the calendar year, most likely. I would argue that's sucking a lot of the capital into the market in an unusual way. But we've got budget changes that we've got to talk about. Like capital is still out there, Jack, but I'd argue slightly harder to access because more money is going into less deals. And both Airtree and Blackbird recently came out with some of the biggest deals they've ever done. But I would say that that's actually like quite representative of what's happening in market at the moment. AI has changed expectations. Founders are being forced to try and move as faster than ever. I'd argue that good businesses or the businesses who are getting that traction are still winning, but ultimately for normal growth founders, like it's tricky in the market at the moment. Jack, like talk me through, like if we're going through the reality check of what's happening in advance to FY27, what do you see at the moment, my friend?
Yeah, look, let's break it down to different levels, right? So there are changes that affect the startups themselves, being R&D, but that is a little while off. So that's 1 July 2028. All right. But for the heavily affected companies, they need to actually start thinking about, start planning now on, what does this mean for their startup? Because, R&D incentive is a key part of the funding model. There's obviously CGT changes at the founders level, which actually inadvertently affects employee share schemes. Okay, so what does this mean for our employee share scheme? So, and there's also something that some people have found out the hard way, which is that I wrote an article last year about ATO receiving $999 million of funding across 5 years to pursue non-compliance or to simply increase the integrity of our tax system, which is necessary. But what does that mean for taxpayers? Is that we're seeing aggressive ATO activity, okay? Not just in any particular industry, all sorts of industries.
They have certainly been more aggressive in regards to clawing money back, Jack. And I'd argue that, how do I put this? That change in attitude for some of their negotiations has probably taken some accountants and some founders by surprise a little bit.
Absolutely. They will they
Uh,
will take the most adverse possible interpretation of the set of circumstances.
Which again needs to be planned for because for a lot of founders, like working capital constraints, particularly with things like payday super coming in, which we'll discuss in a second. But there's a lot going on, Jackson. So I guess what we want to get out of like this next little part is that there's going to be a ton of things that we quickly discuss. What I'd love for you guys to do is just take some notes through about what are some of the things that we think could be directly relevant to your particular situation and trying to build, I guess, a bit of a case of priorities on the things that are either going to adversely affect or potentially accelerate, like your business, so that we can potentially ask or answer some questions as we go, as they pop up. But Dream Team, we very much want this to be interactive, so please make sure that you're writing some things down as we go through this next section. Jack, what's changed? I'd argue a lot's changed. But I asked you to give me some ratings before we jumped on this call in regards to how does FY27 compared to previous years, particularly FY26. And from what I can see from your feedback, you're expecting it to be a little bit more bearish in the next 12 months broadly. Talk me through what you're seeing, and I guess from your ratings, what you're predicting the next 12 months might look like.
Yeah, so there are multiple reasons for for me, thinking this is by no means a high confidence level, but this is just my current thinking. There are multiple reasons why I think the capital raising environment will be a little bit more challenging in FY27 compared to FY26, right? So I think the economic shock globally, in terms of the Iranian war that's still going to flow through the system. So the effects are yet to fully play out, and that will ultimately be a dampener on economic activity and investor appetite. Right. So
Mhm.
that's one thing. Also, there's been some mega IPOs, and like you pointed out, that's gonna draw out a lot of capital. That's going to consume a lot of capital. I've got some clients that say that they're in a hurry to complete their round by a certain amount of time because between SpaceX and Anthropic and now potentially OpenAI, that would potentially have a flow-on effect on the amount of capital available globally.
Mhm. I think that in particular, when it comes to some of the tax and regulation and the investors, like because there's just more uncertainty, that typically just means that people go slower. So if you are
Correct.
looking to fundraise, or if you are looking to grow over the next 12 months, like anticipating that clients might actually be a little bit less inclined to sign bigger contracts, and that investors are possibly going to be less inclined to move quickly. Jack, in my head, that just means things go slower, right? Would you agree with that?
That's exactly right. Uncertainty can be quite bad for the markets because people just sit on the fence. If situation is known to be bad, then if anything, that can prompt some investors to take action, whereas uncertainty, people might just sit on the fence.
Yep. So let's go into this a little bit more depth, Jack. Now, I'm mindful this is not a technical webinar. Our goal is not to explain the intricacies of like the budget changes specifically and all the carve outs directly,
Oh, that
but
was
we
what I
do.
was looking forward to doing, Mark. I was thinking of stealing the mic.
But like we do want to at least at a superficial level have a basic understanding of what's changed, Jack. And that was one of the things that kind of came up in some of the questions was just like, can someone explain to us quickly the CGT changes, how they affect startups? What are the carve outs? Like, does everybody just pay more tax now, Jack? Like, give us just a quick summary of how you've I guess, taken all the feedback from the budget, and then how we were hoping that accountants and finance teams were talking to their founders about it.
So you like a summary? Just
Yes,
a
please.
very high
Yep.
level view. Yeah, look, in terms of capital gains tax, that's what all the memes and outrage are about.
Yep.
But effectively, founders will simply pay double the amount of tax, right? Previously they, half their gain is assessable. Yeah, but going forward, potentially the full amount. But the thing is, what people often miss is that the situation isn't as bad as people
Mhm.
make it out to be because the CGT changes happen from 1 July 2027.
Mhm.
And people get a cost base, a market value cost base uplift
Mhm.
as at that point. So that only the capital gains from that point onwards lose this 50% CGT discount. Okay.
Got
So
you.
the gains up to that point, if they were eligible for the CGT discount, 50% CGT discount, they will still get it. Right. So it's not like immediately you're in double the tax territory.
Got you. Now, two questions in that because I'm mindful that like we don't have a ton of time to go into this in super high depth, but there has been a number of carve outs that the government has kind of come forward with and proposed and may get through in legislation. And once again, this hasn't all actually been passed. So again, we're discussing this without necessarily having like the formal legislation to be able to refer to, Jack. But like, what did you take out from the carve outs? Like, what are you? Like, does that just mean that we all pay more tax now, or is this something that is going to be delayed specifically to a potential exit or having some sort of liquidity event? How does the carve-outs work, and when would it be applied, Jack?
Yeah, so the carve out is the government's proposed response. So none of this has been enshrined into our law yet, and I will expect additional issues to come out. And look, in terms of the carve out, how it's designed to work is somehow it's trying to help the founders, investors, and employee share scheme participants
Hmm.
of what's broadly known as innovative companies. So it's to try to design try to design to help everybody. Now, what it's got a bunch of requirements, and once again, the current proposal is that the company can't be listed, which is fine. That's not an issue for most of our startups. It's not part of a big corporate group where
Yep.
which is once again fine. Annual revenue less than 50 mil, that will cover the vast majority of startups. Depending on your definition of what a startup is, some people still call Atlassian a startup. But 50 mil turnover is pretty generous, right? The company must be less than 10 years old when the shares were issued, right? So this is somehow part of the idea that a company can't be innovative if it's beyond 10 years old. It's kind of like an ageist view of things. But there are additional concessions if you fall into the biotech, deep tech, and medtech categories. And God knows how that's going to be defined. So, watch that space. The company needs to be innovative. This is where it borrows concepts from the early stage innovation company tax incentives. So what are those concepts? We're talking about fuzzy concepts like high growth potential, potential to scale, competitive advantage, right? So what's going to be the definition of that? Like everyone's going to have a different interpretation. And if we've got an ultra aggressive ATO, you can see there's going to be stoushes, on the horizon.
Jack,
Okay.
what I'm hearing is that I need to buy planetstartup.ai, and then I can, and that's the play.
Yeah, that's
Like
it.
it's
Yeah, hashtag financial advice, right?
oh no. But like talk me through, I guess, like because like to go to your point there, and like I've had like a number of our clients have proactively reached out to us. You've had the same people being like, Jack, like, are we supposed to move to Singapore now? Like, what does this all look like? My biggest concern at the moment is that people actually start moving before we know what these goalposts are going to look like. When we spoke, and like what you're telling your founders is be like have a plan, be prepared to move, but just hold for a second because until we actually know what this is all going to look like, how we move is going to probably change pending how this actually comes through into law. Like, how are you coaching the founders at the moment to take this seriously and to be ready for it, but not to do something that they can't take back?
Honestly, Mark, out of the, more than 100 tech companies we work with, not more than a couple have come to me and said, I'm seriously thinking of going overseas. I think founders have already decided that they're not going to move. I do think that there are certainly a lot of headlines in the media about this founder's, going to move overseas. That founder's going to move overseas. But, if you're talking about what's actually happening on the ground, and I like to believe that the founders I work with will come to me asking for advice first if they're moving overseas. So I should know what's going on amongst my tech companies. There's surprisingly few conversations about founders moving overseas
Got you.
because there are major commitments and drawbacks associated with such a move.
Yep, got you. And to be fair, like it's also hard to come back, Jack. So like, if we do set up and whether you are considering changing your personal or your business location, like, to another jurisdiction, it's actually quite hard to come back if you change everything, right? But one of the things that I wanted to just bring up, because I'm mindful that the tagline or the headlines have been very much in regards to the changes in the capital gains tax, the changes in trust distributions, which from a personal point of view, obviously can and would potentially impact like founders and their personal net worth as they start to think about liquidity and how they either potentially sell secondaries down or potentially go through acquisitions and how that all works. But one of the things that's I think has been a bit of a sleeper thing under some of the budget and ATO stuff is things like the additional, as you said, the additional money given to the ATO in order to try and crack down and to try and be more aggressive in setting expectations around timing of payments. The payday super changes that are coming in July, where like moving forward, people will be looking, or like businesses will be required to pay super as they pay the employee like net amounts like to bank accounts and
Yeah.
co. I actually think there's going to be like a really big cash crunch for a number of businesses over the next 12 months because
Hmm.
ultimately there's going to be a lot less slack in the system, both with flexibility from the ATO, requirements to have more cash on hand, like, faster, because obviously
Yeah.
super payments traditionally been paid quarterly.
Right.
Like, are you imagining the same thing, Jack? Like, I'm just seeing a cash flow crisis coming.
Yes, it doesn't help. I don't know whether it's crisis level, but definitely it's just additional emphasis on getting your cash flow forecast done properly and sticking to it. Like you don't just do it, but you need to stick to it and come back to it. So
Mhm.
yes, the situation is getting tougher, especially ATO is incredibly hard to get concessions out of in terms of payment due dates. Once
Mhm.
again, the anecdotal evidence says that all government departments have been told to clamp down on their expenditure, and ATO is clearly being instructed to maximize revenue takings.
Yeah, got you. And so, like, what I'm taking for this is that, like, from a personal wealth position, so for the founders who are thinking about, like, what do the capital gains tax and the trust and distribution changes, what do they mean for me? That's most like a bit of a personal wealth conversation that they should be having with their accountants or any of their financial advisors personally about if they do have any plans to take liquidity or to have, like, take some chips off the table in the next 2 years. Knowing that you've got the right people in place to make sure that you've got a plan for that is going to be important. Knowing that the ATO and, like, more broadly speaking, some of the parts across the budget are just going to be, like, more um, create more uncertainty for the founders over the next 12 months. I think practically, the thing I'd like the founders to take away from this is that while the headlines are very much in regards to tax brackets and what tax you may or may need to pay in the future, in the short term, the most useful thing is to have as much cash on hand or to be mindful of expenses coming into the new financial year, because any cash buffer that you have might actually be really useful if we're thinking about, like, obviously growth in the team, funding and fundraising that might be required, but then more broadly speaking, if they are looking at potentially having an exit or having some liquidity, to be close to their advisors, making sure that their accountant and their financial planner, if they have one, is across their situation so they can actually make the most of the situation as best as possible rather than just taking feedback from LinkedIn. Would you agree with that, Jack?
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, cash is always king, right? Just stating the obvious here, but if the times are going to get tougher, then it's even more important.
I have a quick question from the group, which is from Matt. Jack, if one of the founders is paying, if they're paying themselves a salary, like, do they need to pay their super as well, same day like their employees? And if so, is there a way that they don't have to do that? Good job, Matt.
Good question. And by the way, all these comments are, not tailored tax advice because I don't
Of
understand
course.
your personal circumstances. So I need to get this legalese out of the way. So now, look, if the founder is an employee, then yes, the same requirements as everyone else. Now, are there ways around it? Well, typically for a traditional company, not a tech company, but just call it non-tech companies, industries, there is a sort of uh, uh, trade-off between paying the business owner a wage or paying a frank dividend. Okay.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, with startups, we don't, a lot of the time, there is no such thing as franking credits in the company so that, because they never pay tax in the first place.
And if you've got
So,
investors, Jack, they don't always like you trying to take dividends out of the business earlier. So, yep,
yeah,
that can
yeah,
tricky,
yeah.
tricky too, right?
Yeah, that's right. So pretty much wages is still the key form now, and also investors wouldn't like founders borrowing money from the startup. So, unfortunately, you are stuck with wages most of the time.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine that unless you're really early stage, where, like, you're pre-investment and you have a little flexibility on things like directors' drawings and Kojak, it would, once you had take investment or you are, like, formally launched, it becomes really problematic if you don't play super as an employee, even if that's to yourself. We've had a couple of founders who have found themselves in tricky circumstances because of that. Okay, one of the things I know you're passionate about, Jack, I know this is a really, like, quite a detailed picture dream team, so I'm mindful that we'll talk about it, like, high level, but R&D has very much changed over the last little while, Jack, and is probably going to change more post, like, 1st of July 2028. We have, like, 2 years between now and some of those, like, suggested big changes. Jack, talk me through, what are you thinking? What has been, like, what has been told to us so far, and how are you coaching founders, I guess, to think about their R&D claims over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so the government injected its own flavor into the SERD acronym for strategic examination of R&D, led by Elon Musk's babysitter slash chairman,
Robin, yes.
Robin Denholm, and a bunch of professors. So heavy hitting people who know what they're talking about came up with some suggestions. And so the government decided that no, we're not going to take up those changes. We're going to take up certain things that smell like it, but we're going to apply our own tweaks to it. So from 1 July 2028, companies more than 10 years old will no longer be able to get a refundable R&D, right?
Got
So,
you.
so which would be absolutely disastrous for the companies affected. That's something that I am surprised that there has not been
Mhm.
people jumping up and down about. Um, and now some other major big changes in the R&D side is, currently you can claim R&D on supporting activities as well as core activities. Basically,
Mhm.
core activities are the sexy R&D. Supporting activities are the ones laying the groundwork for the sexy stuff, and they're equally eligible. But the government has decided that they're going to really clamp down on the definition of R&D such that the supporting R&D activities and associated expenses are no longer claimable from
Yep.
1 July 2028, right? So, uh, and in their spirit of give and take, they've increased the R&D rate for the core activities
Mhm.
slightly from 43.5% to 48%. So what this means is that, companies that are used to getting a refundable rebate but won't be simply because they're more than 10 years old, they need to think seriously about, how their cash flows are planned. So for all R&D claimants, there is an incentive to double down on the pure R&D stuff and to be
Mhm.
super focused on what they're doing, but also have the documentation in place to prove why the
Mhm.
expenses are core and not support.
Yeah, in my head, Jack. So, like, we obviously have a little bit of time. So, as far as I understand, there's not going to be a huge change to the R&D like rules over the next 12 months. But if we're thinking about uh, startups or scale ups who are getting close to that 10-year mark, or those who may be, as part of their hypothesis and as part of their R&D planning, have a number of those, like, supporting activities that have traditionally been covered, it might actually be more of a case of starting to think through over the next 12 to 24 months, how do we amend our internal tracking and our ability to be able to justify how we use some of this spend with our R&D advisor on purpose so that we can maybe bring forward some of that spend, or push back some of that spend pending, like, what that's going to be done on. I'm mindful that, like, some of the biggest claimants, I guess, of R&D have traditionally been like companies like Atlassian. Obviously, that will no longer be the case. But in the short term, it feels like this is more of a case of maximizing rather than being scared of the changes. It's actually just a case of maximizing for those changes because over the next 12 to 24 months, as we segue between the two, it's just going to be different what we can claim for. Would you agree with that, Jack?
Yes, definitely. People need to reframe their thinking on what type of behavior the government's trying to encourage and demonstrate that type of behavior so you can be rewarded with the goodies. Okay. And probably the last thing I will add as far as the R&D changes concern is currently there is a cap of $20 million aggregated turnover revenue if you want to be refundable, have refundable R&D. So that cap is going to be increased to 50 mil, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. But the thing is, that 10-year thing is going to limit. So it's kind of like the government gives with one hand and takes with the other.
And don't get me wrong, Jack, like, obviously our goal here, as we mentioned at the top of the call, whilst like our goal is to help the founders to maximize for this, and realistically we'll let the critiquing of like positive and negative be done by the people outside of this call. But the thing I love about knowing that this is coming is that we can do it on purpose. And I think that particularly those who have a strong relationship with their R&D provider, like this is something to plan for. And this can be, obviously the difference of potentially anywhere between a tens of thousands to a few $100,000 worth of like claims, just depending on how you build that over the next 12 to 24 months. One of the things I wanted to bring your attention to, or get some feedback from you, Jack, while we had you, was the investment and capital raising piece. Like I think we mentioned before, um, we've got a number of founders at the moment who are looking to raise capital, and like we've had one AI native product company who literally was oversubscribed before they even officially went to market for their raise. And I've got other founders who have had feedback from their investors that they know they're not going to participate in their next fundraise, or that they're prioritizing their capital into other companies, or that they're just taking longer to get feedback and to decide on these things. Talk me through what you're seeing, Jack, because I'm mindful that, like, from a capital raising point of view, I'd argue this is probably the place in the next 12 months where I think there could be the most uncertainty, is just what are the investors doing and what they're putting their money into. What are you seeing, Jack?
Yeah, look, I do think there's certainly a two-speed economy, and what's flavor of the month, is very much the AI companies also, but also like ones that can demonstrate a pathway to profitability.
Mhm,
Previously it was all about market share, market share, market share. Now it's like you have to demonstrate at which point are you going to break even? What's your plan for breaking even? Right.
mhm,
So that's absolutely critical. And so there's a lot of disparity. Companies that are, in favor, like you say, oversubscribed, right? No
mhm.
issues. Like VCs can invest from day one.
Mhm. And what I'm seeing at the moment as well, Jack, is that traditionally, like a lot of our clients were really binary. It was either VC backed or it was bootstrapped, and never shall the two kind of intertwine. What I'm seeing now is that a lot of the founders that we're working with are having a much more bespoke capital stack, where they might engage like high net worth individuals who may not be what I call professional startup investors, but are actually people who have capital and are willing to back ideas, but don't have that high expectation of return that some of the VCs or traditional angels might. And they're using those in the first instance to get to market to be able to prove that they've got something interesting. And then they either bootstrap from there and kind of seed strap with an initial round of funding, or they're like then raising capital from those more professional startup investors once they hit $1 million worth of revenue or a certain growth target. I guess what I'm finding is that traditional binary pathway is it just isn't as common at the moment, Jack. Like I'm just seeing different capital stacks for different businesses being built on purpose. Like talk me through that just a little bit. Like if some of the VCs in particular are going very in on AI, like what are the things that you're coaching some of the other companies? Because some of the SaaS companies are doing just as good as they've ever done, Jack. It's really funny. Like just because the public comps have changed, like the sales forces and so forth, their multiples and their share price have gone down, so that broadly SaaS has gone down. But some of the SaaS companies we've seen are performing really well. They're just getting capital from different places now. Like, could you talk to that just slightly, Jack?
Yeah, look, I agree. It's not a binary thing anymore. There's different ways to get it done, and there's friends, families, and fools round. The more you can get done with the capital that you've got before you engage VCs, it gives founders a bit more, breathing room because VCs, they're great in some ways, but they also have very specific requirements, right? So,
I do.
they can really open doors for you. They can provide seriously good advice on the board, but at the same time, you better perform, right? So you
Yeah.
better perform once you have them on the cap table. There are definitely no hard and fast rules on you have to get X capital from Y
Mhm.
investor by Z time, right? So it comes down to how little capital you can use to get to the next level. in
Yeah,
terms
the
of
next milestone.
product,
Yeah.
product and market share.
Yep. And I guess like one thing to add there is my favorite capital or my favorite is still from clients. It's still revenue, Jack. And so what we are seeing is that a lot of more because the tech piece is so easy to build these days, or easy is relative. Realistically, there's parts to that, but we're finding that more founders are getting to market faster with at least an initial prototype, and are ultimately using funding from clients to be able to get to those initial milestones. What I would say is that the
Yeah.
two fastest companies I've seen over the last 6 months, both bootstrapped and both didn't take capital, and both just were able to get early commits from their clients to be able to get started, Jack. And to be fair, that's a wonderful place to start from, right?
I suspect that's why where your quiz question at the start, what's your level of optimism, is
Mhm.
the next year going to be better, same or worse? Why it's such a positive outcome is because people are genuinely excited at the markets that
Mhm.
AI is basically surfacing for them, but also just the amount of work that can be done with like just one or two technical founders.
Yep. Yep. One other thing I wanted to quickly bring up on the call, Jack, because one of the things I've had a number of conversations with over the last 3 to 6 months is founders talking more openly around the difference between, I guess, a traditional software slash SaaS business model versus an AI business model, also reflecting their thoughts around do we stay as, I guess, what I call an AI enhanced or an AI abled product versus burning it all down and then coming back as an AI native product. And to me, there's a big difference between the two. If we're thinking about like the AI business model, the thing that cracks me up, Jack, is that like purely on a business point of view, like an AI business looks more like a services business because of the way that they use tokens, and obviously the cost per each marginal net user coming on board typically increases, or doesn't, at least doesn't decrease, when you are like adding new users to an AI business versus like a SaaS business where those like marginal new net users are typically like become so minimal over time that that's where the gross margins become really, really nice. And that's why they've traditionally had such high valuations. Like it's so fascinating that SaaS, traditional software have kind of had their valuations attacked because people think that the AI products will possibly beat them in the future. But at the same time, like there's just a lot of like I guess uncertainty in so much as what does a great AI business model look like, and how does this impact more broadly speaking, I guess, like the who's investing in what, and what should we prioritize, and what do we do for an individual business. Jack, what are you seeing at the moment with the AI business models versus the non-AI, like our native business models? And what are some of the things that you think the founders should take to heart when they're like considering what they should do over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, look, you know, the first thought that came to mind is that, you know, uh, cryptocurrency, right? Blockchain, right?
Mhm.
So things they come in cycles. There was a time where blockchain was the hottest thing, and people were using blockchain for things that made no sense at all, right? And were getting inflated valuations. And then when, like they say, when the tide goes out, you find out that who's been swimming naked.
Yeah.
So, I'm seeing certain echoes of that with AI. There's
Mhm.
companies that, there was one company we work with, they provided a wide labeling solution, and then next time I talk to them, they go, "Oh, we're an AI company now," and just a complete pivot, right?
Yeah.
They're doing something that's great, but I'm just saying, how much of it is hype?
Mhm.
I think, there's going to be a moment of reckoning the same way that there was dot-com boom, a moment of reckoning, and the same way
Yeah.
there's crypto and blockchain, a moment of reckoning. That's when you find out that, whether this AI stuff is hot air or AI is genuinely uh, boostful for your business.
Agreed. And Jack, one of the things that I would challenge the founders on the call to think about is like, what are the key parts of their business that could be disrupted from an AI equivalent or a product, like, if they were competing against them, but ultimately as well, like, what like is some of the things that the investors or the broader community implying that AI will be able to do true, and based on the data we have at the moment. And I guess the reason I say it is it's actually a really key strategic decision to pivot from being like a software as a service, or like, a, let's say, a pre 2024 business model, and then obviously then coming out rebuilding the product completely from scratch to be AI native, or at least AI focused, and then
Mm.
changing your pricing strategy and your business model completely at the behest of the feedback from investors and co. I'm mindful that, like, like what before 12 months ago, Jack, it wasn't sexy to run a service business. And now, if you put AI at the front of it and say we're an AI native services business, all of a sudden YC now wants to potentially invest in you. I guess to your point, trying to be able to distinguish between what's the flavor of this week versus what's the like core business fundamentals that you can build a business on. I think in the short term, the biggest thing to be mindful of though is that the investors are just struggling to be able to put like a significant amount of capital
Yeah.
between behind founders who are not working on an AI native product at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Look, with AI, there's upside risk and downside risks, right? And risk is obviously one of the key considerations when when it comes to investors making capital allocation decisions. Certainly, the upside risk is well known. The downside
Mhm.
risk is just how quickly things are moving,
Yeah.
and the market is constantly being surprised by that. I don't think enough downside risk has been priced into the public and private markets.
Mhm.
And also there's the same questions that's being asked of the multiple trillions being spent by the large public companies will be asked for, to the startups and scale ups, which is, stick to the fundamentals, uh,
Yeah.
demonstrate the return on investment, demonstrate when you're going to break even.
And look, Jack, the thing I love about this is once again it comes back to cash, right? Like realistically, if you have access to investor capital, they believe in that AI narrative, and that's what you're able to be able, like, that's a great place to know that you can grow and scale fast. But realistically, on the flip side, building a business that's actually profitable, it seems to be like, particularly when it comes to exit, like there's just been really low tolerance recently. There's some of the exits that we've had with companies who are still burning cash when they're trying to get past that $10 million run
That's
rate.
it.
And so
Yeah.
like I'm mindful that like having a really strong, potentially profitable business, but so certainly cash flowing business is certainly that's the new flavor of the month at the moment,
Yeah,
right?
I'd rather invest in a company, a SaaS, a traditional SaaS company that can demonstrate a path to profitability than a AI company that can't do that. So,
Yeah.
AI, yes, we love AI, but you just can't be distracted by the shiny new thing. You got to still go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah, gotcha. And so, Jack, so we take all that. So, like, there was a fair bit there that we skipped through pretty quickly on purpose because, like, what we're trying, I guess, is to have a instead of a technical conversation, having a more typical off-record conversation that we feel like the founders should be having either with their finance teams or their accountants or their R&D support. Because realistically, what we're trying to figure out is strategy, right? Like what we're trying to figure out what matters. Like, how do we amplify the business mechanics that we currently have, and how do we think about the things that are either going to be challenges in our market or our vertical, or specifically with our business, either based on our current cash position or the decisions that we need to make in regards to our product or our business over the next 12 to 24 months. In my head, if I was sitting down with my accountant, and to be fair, Jack, you are actually now my accountant, bless. But like, if we were talking about a business and I'm thinking about what does this thing need to look like for the next 12 to 24 months, these are some of the things I think that should be a conversation, which is a like growth versus profitability. Like, at what point are we starting to think about and planning for a break-even scenario? And like, how much capital, if any, do we need to be able to make it to that point? But very much doubling onto that, the cash flow and runway conversation, like how much cash do we have? How much do we need? And what are our milestones to make sure
Yeah.
that like, we're being like, thoughtful about like, how much cash is realistically going to be required based on the changes that are happening in market at the moment. And then
Yeah,
from a product and
that's a key question, Mark, because I
yeah,
explained to startups and scale ups is that the valuation of their company doesn't go up in a linear fashion, right? It comes in big leaps, and then a lot of
yeah,
time it's flatlining, and then they reach the next stage. It's basically a step change. So it's very much a question of how do I get the capital, be it investor capital, or be it debt financing, or simply just revenue. How do I get the capital to get to that next stage?
yeah. And I think the two I wanted to ask you on this slide, because I think that even operators that are quite experienced sometimes struggle with this, is that capital efficiency piece, Jack, which is like startups ebb and flow through like growth at all costs to high expectations of invested like capital. At the moment, the ability to do more with less, like the ability to be able to have like over time increased output with a different cost base to be able to do that, whether it is like, a smaller team, whether that is like, more systems inside internally, whether that's reviewing pricing to try and maximize the value capture that the startup is having with their clients as they are scaling. Like that capital efficiency piece, like what should the founders be thinking about in developing that skill set specifically in the next 12 months, do you think?
Yeah, look, I I'm seeing companies with one or two technical founders do amazing things that used to take a team of 10, right? So, I'm saying something that, a lot of founders would know by now, but, you do need to calibrate, recalibrate, what is possible with the capital that you have. But also, they need to bear in mind that um, it's not all good news because yes, you're getting additional capital efficiency, but so are your competitors. The goalposts have changed. So you're not competing with the version of your company from 2 years ago. You're competing with other competitors who can also access the same capital efficiency.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, um, whether it's the founder having this skill set or whether it is having an internal finance person responsible for some of these things, having a basic understanding of like if you're in burn stage, how much you're burning, and from a pricing point of view, what the gross margin percentage is of most of the transactions going through your business, and then thinking through things like revenue per employee and
Mm,
like sales pipeline, like how long do you go through a sales like a cycle, and what's the payback on any marketing spend? Like it's not just a case of saying like hiring less people to do more. What we're finding is like that capital efficiency across all functions, like that's the hack at the moment. It's the
yeah.
ability to be able, like the founders who are growing really fast are typically either finding a customer demographic that they can reach cost effectively.
Mm,
They have a really good conversion cycle where whatever the market expectation is, whether it's B2C, where they're trying to try and get like a higher percentage of people like buying that compared to like competitors, or whether it's like business to enterprise where it's like a faster way to be able to get enterprises to be able to engage and pay for pilots or opportunities compared to their competitors. But then lastly is that like that feedback loop and learning. I think that skill set has become alongside agency, like the ability for founders to be able to attack problems with agency and then be able to have more done with less. Those are
mm.
the things, if I had to kind of collectively say, those are what the best founders are doing at the
That
moment.
makes sense.
Would you
Yeah,
agree with that,
I
Jack?
totally agree. And presumably, when you with the companies that you work with, Mark, that what you regard as fairly benchmark, from a couple of years ago, I would have thought that
It's blown up,
fundamentally
Jack.
changed by now,
Yeah.
right? Is that
All
is
the
that is
numbers,
that what you're
yeah.
seeing?
Well, we used to say like what triple triple double double like used to be the code for like three times in first year, three times second year, and then double like third fourth year. Like we just it's now just like it's just that would be considered probably slow at the moment, Jack.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep. I'm
one of the things.
curious. So before we move on, I'm curious about like, do you have a broad kind of set of benchmarks that is current as of 25th of June? That, a say seed and pre-seed and Series A kind of company should be looking at that potentially you could sort of just talk about it at a very high level?
Yep. So, um, short answer is now everything's kind of bespoke, Jack. And what I mean by that is like by vertical and by customer type. So,
Mm,
like what you expect from B2B versus B2C or B to enterprise, like those all have different thoughts in regards to like, like customer acquisition cost and like speed of sales cycle, and then like what the gross profitability or the gross margin might look like on the initial pricing structure. But like one of the things that I've just noticed is that like once upon a time, all those benchmarks that like were typically shared by YC or Co, like that was kind of like the common or that's what people just assumed. If we did better than that, then like that people will find us attractive. And what we're realizing is that like now people are hitting some of those old school numbers, like that triple triple double double like type of old hand number, and investors are still saying sorry, like we have better opportunities at the moment. And so like
mm,
that's where I think picking your mark on the investors are really important, because what we're finding is that like potentially those non-professional startup investors who understand your vertical and industry but don't have the mandate to try and have to provide like 100 times return or a fund returning investment just based on you specifically, that's where it's become a little bit more bespoke in the capital, because like in the capital stack, just because some of the investor VC expectations for early stage founders now are pretty absurd, Jack. But the thing is that some
yeah.
of the companies are hitting them, like they're growing like 10,000%, like
Yeah.
from
So,
starting from like $1,000 in like a month one to hitting a $10 million run rate before the end of the year. Like it's
yeah.
absurd how quickly some of these companies are going. But that's not common. Like it's not that's not everybody, right? And so we don't want to tell everybody here on the call that you should be on a $10 million run rate by the end of the first calendar year in business. But what I would say is that you need to be now really thoughtful about who do you attack from a capital point of view and a potential exit point of view,
Mm,
because that being fit for purpose now is more important than hitting a benchmark. Does that
yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is previous rules of thumb no longer apply.
Mhm.
Number one, and number two is you've got to be a lot more nuanced. You can't just go, okay, apply one metric from a different business to your business. So yeah,
Yeah.
and then you might potentially be surprised unpleasantly in conversations with investors.
Yeah, and I guess like it's just to add, the reason why we included this slide is that one of the things we're noticing is that a lot of founders who were traditionally on that VC backed pathway are no longer growing fast enough to be on that pathway. And Jack, for them, like their biggest thing, the biggest decision to decide is, do we get to like a cash flow break even and potentially to profitability and then kind of land in the world of private equity, or what, a lifestyle business. I hate the term lifestyle business, but like for the sake of this conversation, do how do we think about being profitable? Like I have a lot of high growth founders who don't value being profitable, not realizing that there's actually a lot of value in that if they're looking for acquisition or potential investment. Um, it's all about growth, obviously, Jack. But like to me, at the moment, the best clients that we're seeing are the ones who are able to get to market pretty quickly with minimal invested capital and
Yep.
get to the point where they hit profitability and are growing really fast at the same time. In the conversations we're having, those are the ones that are being hunted for investment. Those are the ones who are hunted for exits. Those are the ones that at the moment people are prioritizing. I guess I just wanted to make sure that profitability was on everybody's
Yep.
talking points, because I actually think that's an underestimated like
Yeah.
way to be considered a highly valuable asset.
That's a key consideration ever since what, 2023, 2024, would you say, Mark?
Mm.
Like the
Yep.
profitability bit piece. Like it's not even that whether you're profitable right now, but you can demonstrate that even if you're not profitable now, what's your plan? What's your timing to get to profitability? I think that
Yep.
is, a company could still be in this top left quartile, even if, they can still be in a best position and be
Mhm.
super popular amongst investors, even if they're not profitable, but they can demonstrate and
Yeah.
prove how they're going to get to profitability in the near to medium term, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, I'm mindful of time, Dream Team. In regards to getting close to wrapping up now, if you do have any questions that you'd like to possibly get Jack or I's opinion on, please put them in the chat. I'll get to those in one moment, and we will ask Jack after we put all our legal caveats into the chat that we will do our best to give some thoughts or opinions on. So if you do have any questions, please share them there. But I guess in regards to like, what should founders do, Jack? Like if we were actually sitting down with like everybody on the call one-on-one talking about them as clients or them as investors, like if we're just giving them a quick little roadmap of a checklist of things that like, we think they should be doing. One is obviously finishing this year, this financial year properly, but then in regards to building next year's plan, what would you want them to be talking about, Jack?
Building next year's plan. Oh, very good question. Are you referring to the financial side of things or the tax? Like,
Probably both, Jack. Like if you were talking to like your like any of the people on the call here as if they were their client, like what are some of the
yeah,
things you would talk
yeah.
to them about
Okay.
for planning for next year?
Cool. All right. So let's talk about the different levels, right? So at the founder level, get a valuation, a
Hmm.
solid valuation, not some back of the envelope calc valuation. Get a valuation as at June 2027, because the founders will use that as their cost base,
Hmm.
for working out, not really cost base, so not the right term, but gains up to that point
Yep.
will get the 50% CGT discount. So there's real dollars on the line here. So that's one thing. Okay. In terms of founders that are seriously looking to move overseas, just know that you're gonna upend your life. And there's this thing that's colloquially known as exit tax. All right. So
Hmm.
basically, just moving overseas doesn't necessarily take your assets, including your shares in your startup, outside the Australian tax net. It doesn't work like that. So Twiggy Forrest can't just move to Dubai, then all of a sudden like be outside the Australian tax net. If it was so simple, everyone would have done it. So this concept of exit tax where the capital gains up onto till the point of them leaving, they need to pay some kind of exit tax on that. So it's almost treated as a deemed disposal. Okay.
Okay.
Are they willing to do that? Because you're basically forced with this difficult choice of paying $1 today to potentially save $2 down the track, for example, right? So
Hmm.
just as so that's what founders need to think about. They also need to be aware that if they move overseas, personally, even if after all this they really do that, their company can still remain Australian. Nothing says they need to leave Australia with the company as well. So it can still be an
Hmm.
Australian company, right?
Yep.
So
Gotcha.
that's at the founders level. Now, just once again, I'll talk very quickly because I know that there's only limited time. Um, now, at the startup level, people need to plan for their R&D rebate, make it more, from 1 July 28 onwards, it needs to be more core activity, specifically around experimentation and all the sexy stuff. They need to figure out what they're going to do with the employee share schemes. Okay,
Hmm.
because a lot of employee share schemes were built around the idea of leveraging off the 50% CGT discount. Right.
Hmm.
So if that's going to fall away, then what does that mean for your employee share scheme? Do you need to build a new one? Okay.
Yep. And even with the carve outs, they can get tricky, Jack. So like you just need to be mindful that somebody needs to have a good review of that, regardless of where we land on the carve outs, because I'm mindful
Yeah.
that it's quite easy to accidentally trip it up, like with how the fund rules work, right?
Yeah, so this is going to be really, really messy. That's my prediction.
Got you. And then in regards to, I'm mindful that, and look, don't get me wrong, Jack, like most founders are like this. They often go looking for the right people, like at the time of which they need them, rather than potentially investing and having relationships with key people probably a little bit earlier than they may need to have them for the stage, like, after, I guess, where they are at the moment. I'd argue that one of the things that would be mission critical coming out of this conversation is actually having an accountant, potentially a lawyer or advisors, like, potentially an internal finance person, like in order to be able to try and get as much sophisticated support through this time as possible. And obviously, like talking your own book here, I'm mindful that, like, yes, that implies that like what we're doing is important. But Jack, one of the things that's really hard is hard to change things retroactively, but it's much easier to plan for it. Talk me through what you're thinking in regards to if there was anybody on the call that wanted to have a conversation with you specifically or with an accountant, what should they be looking for in an accountant that works specifically with startups and scale ups? Because not all accountants do that well.
Yeah, so someone with industry experience absolutely helps. Otherwise, you're paying for their time while they're figuring out the answer. You're paying for their training.
Yeah.
And also, someone needs to bear the combination of commercial, tax, and legal considerations in mind when they give advice. It's really easy to give advice that just considers one particular aspect, but to provide advice that makes sense from all angles, that's a lot harder. And
Yeah.
also, someone needs to bear, when it comes to structuring, they need to start with the end in mind.
And I think that now, Dream Team, if you have any questions to share, very much please put that in the Q&A. But I think if I was in the audience shoes, the two things I'd be looking at just doing is A, coming up with my what do I need to have done before end of financial year this year? What do I need to have done in the next like 30, 60, 90 days of FY27? And then who is the team that I need around me to make sure that that all makes sense. Now, Jack, while I'm waiting for any questions that may or may not come through the Q&A, I guess the one question I had quickly to start was just what do you want um, from an from a founder point of view if they're on the fence in regards to like I guess some of the things that we've discussed today. Who would be their first port of call? Like if they wanted to have a more in-depth conversation, who would you point them to initially to have an initial conversation with?
About to
Or
start with their fractional CFO. Start, because that is, ultimately, commercial drivers
Mhm.
are, the most important thing, followed by tax and legal and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, got you. I have a question here from Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that. For Australian companies undertaking engineering commercialization overseas, what's best practice for structuring projects so they remain eligible for Australian R&D support while also accessing the international grants and funding opportunities? What does that look like for you, Jack?
Yeah, so the Australian government's not going to want to be keen to use taxpayers' dollars to stimulate overseas economic activity. So there's this thing called overseas finding, but they are incredibly hard to get. So
Mhm.
do not try to access overseas funding, advanced overseas finding, unless you're absolutely sure you can prove that such activities can only be done overseas because you can't find the right resources and people to do it. Okay. So if
Yep.
you're not sure, don't even apply for Austin industry because they got this nasty habit of saying no to that, but then saying no to the onshore activities as well.
That's so frustrating. What I'm hearing is what you ideally you'd be doing it on purpose. So like trying to structure how like these projects were done to try and maximize their chance of being able to get the R&D support or to get the international grants and so forth. But if they can't cross pollinate or can't like correlate, you want to make sure you at least get access to one, right?
Yeah, that's right. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So don't risk the mothership in terms of the local activity just because you're trying to gain R&D, access for the overseas activities. It's very, very hard, and don't do it unless you're sure. It's high risk.
Got you. Another quick question, Jack, we had, which was what needs to be declared versus paid before 30 June this year if we're being thoughtful about, I guess, the tax
Yeah, very good
consequences of
question.
that?
So recall my comment that there's two types of tax planning before 30 June. There's R&D tax planning, then there's generic tax planning, right? So if you talk about generic tax planning, pay all your super. Payday super has not yet applied yet. So for super relating, super that's outstanding, as at 30 June, get it paid before that. All right, and so you can deduct it and claim it for R&D. Write off any bad debt. Actually, write it off. You get a deduction for it. If you pay people bonuses, then try to get a deduction for it by having the company resolve to pay, having the bonus amounts communicated before 30th of June. And if there are specific expenditure accruals, make your expenditure accruals as accurate and as specific possible so your accountant can deduct it. So these are all things that will improve your tax position. Okay, so recall the comment that because R&D expenses are treated as non-deductible, even a loss-making company could end up with a tax liability by the time the R&D expenses are treated as non-deductible. So you want to optimize your tax position in order to optimize your R&D position.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of R&D, so I'll just say pay associates. If you got associate entity expenses, pay it before year end. Otherwise, it's non-claimable until it's paid. And get the documentation in place. ATO and Austin industry, they love documentation. So get it documented, timesheets and all that non-sexy stuff, get it done.
Oh, Jack, I appreciate that. Now, Dream Team, if you have any other quick questions, feel free to put that in the chat now for us to quickly add to the conversation. But I guess in regards to next steps, Jack, we never designed this to necessarily be what I would call like a hard call to action. But I'm mindful there could be some questions coming out of this call. And for some of the people on the call, they may not love their accountant. And so if people wanted to engage with you either on the tax planning R&D incentive or conversations around things like their ESOP, what's the most important way, or what's the easiest way for them to reach out to you, Jack?
Yeah, just shoot me a note. My email's on the bottom of the slide. Just send me a question, and we can chat on see whether there's a fit in working together.
Awesome. And the same from a plant startup point of view, like we obviously love working with early stage high growth company founders to be able to be more financially literate and helping them to be able to make better financial decisions and to have better performance. But I guess the big thing we want you to take away from this is putting aside Planet Startup and William Buck, like you should be talking to at this time of year your financial advisors to make sure that you're prepped for next year. And because there has been so much change over the last 3 to 6 months, Jack, I'd argue that this is the most important time to be in communication with whoever you're getting your financial advice from. There's just too much at stake to
That's
be
right.
able to casually go through the next little while. So, in
Yeah,
short,
we had some boring budgets for the last few years, but boy, oh boy, did things change
it's
this year.
I didn't post a LinkedIn post about the budget, but if I did, Jack, it would have been I didn't realize that so many founders actually watched the budget. I was like, nobody ever talks to me about the budget, Jack, and everybody wanted to talk to me about it this year.
Yes.
What we covered today, Dream Team. So thank you everybody for being part of the call. We had our initial quiz up front just to see what the pulse check was across the group. We then went through what's changed, what matters, what we think you should do, and some ideas on next steps. For us, please review your current financial situation. If you are doing really well, please don't take that for granted. Maximize for it if things aren't going quite as well as you would hoped, or in particular, if you're looking at a bit of a cash crunch coming up, please check in and make sure that whether it's your accountant, whether it's your own finance team, whether it's Jack or myself, like please make sure you're having conversations proactively. If you do have the chance, please reach out to your accountant, make sure that they're across what's going on for you for next financial year. And then then in the short term, Dream Team, we are cheering you on. We want more winners. All we ask when you're rich and famous is that we have a pina colada and a t-shirt on the island when you buy that with post CGT tax money. Jack, is that a joke we can make now? I don't know. But
Sure.
Jack, any final words, my friend? Anything that's top of mind for you as we finish up the call today?
Yeah, look, I'm very encouraged by the level of optimism that the founders have demonstrated, and I think that's the right attitude. There are lots of people complaining, but really good founders know that they got bigger fish to fry. So it's awesome to see.
Jack, it was a pleasure to have this session with you, my friend. Thank you so
Likewise,
much
Mark.
for being our friend here at Planet Startup and across the Scolari Group. But Dream
A
Team,
pleasure.
this was our founders briefing for FY27. Thank you so much for being on the call with us today. Good luck. May the force be with you. We can't wait to hear your success stories. Please share your thoughts and feedback. We always love to see what we can improve for next time. And we've given you 4 minutes back. So 4 minutes back in your day. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday and end of week, and happy end of financial year, Dream Team. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate you, my
Thank
friend.
you, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.
Have a great rest of your day, team.